Hi, Pisces. Welcome to Pandora Astrology's monthly horoscope for September of 2022. We are the astrologers of Pandora Astrology. I'm Jamie Kale Miller. I'm in Berkeley, California.
I'm Julia Mijas in Pioneer, California.
Well, hey, Pisces, this month's themes revolve around relationships and intimacy. And if you are curious to know more about how things are going in your relationships and when these influences will begin and when they'll end, any of that could be explained and more in a lifelong love reading or a blissful union couples reading if you wanted to have your partner involved in the reading. You can find links for these readings in the text that comes with this video. So on that note, I want to start with Juno, which is traveling along through Pisces in your first house. And I would have mentioned this in last month's horoscope, so I'm just going to do a brief recap right now. Juno's been retrograde in Pisces since July and will go direct in October. We've got a video with much more about it in our 2022 news playlist on our YouTube channel, Pandora Astrology. But just to give you the bottom line right now, with Juno retrograde in Pisces in your first house, you're undergoing a relationship retrospection period, asking yourself, how does this relationship mesh with my spiritual value system? And it may have you sort of pulling back from the relationship and going into a kind of a dreamy place for the duration. And I could have more to say about this and best ways to handle it when I talk about the moon later in this horoscope. But for now, I just want to say, don't take things personally. You might feel like this relationship and how it's going right now has a lot to do with your identity, but don't take things personally that happened during this Juno retrograde, although it is important to do the exploration that comes with it. I'll say more in a minute when we get to the moons, but for now, let me fling the ball over to Julia, who wants to tell you about Mercury, Venus, and Mars.
Yes, Pisces. I'll start with Mercury because I think Mercury is the busiest out of all the planets this month. He's going into two different houses and doing a retrograde cycle. So Mercury does represent your mind, the thinker in you. It's the planet of communication and mentation. Wherever Mercury is, we tend to be very preoccupied. So Mercury starts the month in your 8th house. This is a financial house. It represents money that you share with others or with institutions versus money you earn on your own. That's more of a second house specialty. So the 8th house is mortgages, taxes, loans, inheritances, investments, crypto, that kind of stuff. Your partner's income is ruled by this 8th house as well. And at the start of the month with Mercury in the 8th, you could be spending a lot of time planning, thinking, organizing, and even communicating around finances in your life. Maybe you're thinking, should I shift around my investments? Or maybe you're having conversations with your partner or your family over shared resources. Then on the 10th, Mercury is going to go retrograde in this house. So retrograde cycles. A retrograde cycle is when Mercury's motion from our perspective on Earth appears to be moving backwards in the sky. And it's a 3-week period of review, of miscommunications, of having to redo things. So in the 8th house, you could be rethinking, replanning your financial life. There might be miscommunications over money too during this cycle. And another thing the 8th house can represent with Mercury in it, this is a very probing house. It's a house of research and investigation. So if you are researching something or investigating something in your life, you might be going back over your conclusions. So try to be flexible with your thinking during retrograde cycles of Mercury. Then on September 22nd, Mercury is exactly conjoined the Sun. This happens about in the greater retrograde cycle about 2 times, once when it's going retrograde, another time when it goes direct, which is going to happen later on. And when Mercury exactly conjoins the sun, this particular epiphany day is what we call them. Mercury is retrograde, so it's known as Lesser Epiphany Day versus Greater Epiphany Day when it's direct. This is a time of insights, revelations, clarity into the retrograde cycle and into where Mercury is in your chart. So, in the 8th house, where this Lesser Epiphany Day is taking place, you could have some clarity, you could be making some connections, maybe having some downloads over your shared finances with other people, or what your greater financial strategy is. Or perhaps these are coming towards your research and investigation of some matter in your life. Then on September 23rd, Mercury is going to dip into your 7th house. This is a partnership house. This is a house of contractors. So whatever partners you have in your life, maybe you have a romantic relationship, maybe you have a business partner, that's all ruled by this house, as well as the people you hire for advice. So yeah, there could be, the miscommunications from money while Mercury's in the 8th might start shifting more into your relationship. Maybe you and your partner are walking away from the same conversation with totally different meanings of what you guys thought. So, be prepared to just kind of have to go back and sort of discuss things again, and have to clarify things again. And if you are hiring people to give you advice, counselors, lawyers, doctors, this could be a time where you're kind of going back on their advice a bit. Maybe you're reviewing it. Maybe you're wondering, should I hire somebody else? Now, this whole annoying retrograde cycle is going to be finished on October 2nd, and we're going to cover that in our next month's video, so definitely stay tuned to those. Now I have some happy news about Venus. Everyone loves Venus, so I love talking about her too. She's the planet of art, beauty, and relationships. Wherever she is, we can get a little luck, things can come a little more easily to us, and we can find more pleasure in them. So on September 4th, Venus is entering your 7th house. So if you are having miscommunications with your partner, it's going to be okay with Venus in here, because she's going to smooth things over so that, these miscommunications don't turn into sort of emotional, haywire situations. Venus in the 7th is a wonderful time in your relationship. It's a time of feeling like there's more harmony, more pleasure, more diplomacy in your relationship. It's also a wonderful time for single Pisces to get out there and date too. And then on September 30th, Venus is going to be entering your 8th house. You're probably going to want to hear about that, and we're really covering it in next month's video, because she's only there for like the last day or two of the month. Now, finally, I do have to mention some things about Mars. Mars is going to have some interesting stuff coming up right now. Now, Mars is a more challenging planet than Venus. He's known traditionally as a malefic, which just means he's a bit more challenging, but even the challenging planets can have some very constructive higher sides to them too. Now, Mars is going to start the month in the sign Gemini, which rules your 4th house. This is the house of family and home. And what's so interesting right now is that Mars is slowing down in the sky this month. So Mars is going to technically be going retrograde next month. He does this about once every 2 years. So, it's pretty significant. We get 3 Mercury retrogrades a year, so those happen all the time, but a Mars retrograde is significant. And, and this retrograde cycle, since it's taking place in your 4th house, it means Mars is really going to be hanging out here for a number of months. And if you do want to hear about that retrograde cycle, definitely pay attention to our next month's video. So Mars is the planet of action and activity. Wherever we have Mars, we're very driven. And it's also a planet of disagreement and conflict and frustration as well. The 4th house is the house of your family and home. It's also the house that rules your past, things that happened in your childhood and adolescence, for example. And so when Mars is in the fourth house, it means that there's a lot of activity going on in the home front. You know, maybe you're doing a lot of projects around your house. Maybe you're having a lot of emotional engagements with people with Mars in the fourth house. So that could be people you're living with. That could be family members as well, even if you're not living with them anymore. The fourth house can have a lot to do with our parents too. So Mars in the fourth house, yeah, it can be a time of a little bit of feistiness, a little bit of crunchiness and frustration with family members. And but Mars in the fourth house can be very good for a few things. One, if you do any work from home in your career, lots of people are working from home these days. This can be a time where you can feel very driven, get lots of stuff done. The fourth house, since it is your physical home, this can be a time of getting a lot of projects out of the way. You know, I would say, especially if you're feeling that there's some feistiness cropping up with your family members, try to engage in some project together, or try to see if you can, I mean, even if you could work out with your family members, even if you guys could go for a bike ride or a hike together or something like that, that can definitely help you access the higher manifestation of this transit too. Yeah, and going retrograde next month. So definitely listen to our next month's video, because that's going to be an interesting one to hear about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there are two moons and a seasonal shift that I want to tell you about. The first of these is a full moon in Pisces right here in your first house of identity and self. And it falls opposite to the sun in Virgo. That's the nature of full moons. It's a moon-sun opposition. And so this one will be high emotion, as again, full moons have a tendency to be, but it's also going to incorporate some of that Juno retrograde relationship retrospection that's going on. And so we're calling this moon Reimagine Relationships, but Face Pragmatic Facts. And so as this moon kind of expands emotionally on the process of looking at your relationships and looking deeper into your relationships for their underlying meaning. Meanwhile, the sun over here is pulling for something a little bit more pragmatic and grounded and solid, you know, in physical reality. So there's a real balancing act going on during this moon. The next thing that happens is that the sun, which has been traveling along through Virgo, moves off out of Virgo and into Libra, and thus enters your eighth house. And that happens on the Epiphany day that Julia mentioned, which is when Mercury and the sun meet up while Mercury is retrograde. And yes, there is a very big focus on looking at, you know, stuff underlying your shared finances. And a lot of questions may have come up, and there may begin to be the solution to some of those puzzles on this Epiphany day, which does also happen to be the day when the season of Libra begins. Now, as the sun enters into this house, you want to bring the sunlight of your high quality attention to this arena, which is that arena of sharing, including shared finances, shared emotions. So it's a house of therapy, it's a house of sexuality, it's a house of all things underneath the surface. And in particular, when it comes to shared finances with Mercury retrograde here, you may have had a lot of questions crop up that haven't been answered yet about your financial situation that you may share with another person, such as a spouse or a business partner. And a lot of, you know, sort of like, you know, unpaid debt may have come to the surface, for example. And when the sun moves into this house, and for the 30 days that it's here, starting September 23rd, it's a really good time to bring some life-giving attention to all those things, so that wonderful things can flourish in this house, instead of, you know, painful things like, you know, arguments with your partner, or you know, it's just a really good time to handle that debt that maybe you found in an envelope still unopened, crammed into the back of the drawer. And so this month is a really good time to do that. And what better time for new beginnings than the moon and sun conjoining right here in Libra for a lovely and sweet new moon in Libra right here in your 8th house. And new moons are about new beginnings. They're a great time for the planting of seeds, for starting over, for putting something into place that isn't going to flower or fruit today or tomorrow, but sometime in the indefinite future. And you're just paving the way for that. And this being the 8th house, this is a really good time for planting great high quality seeds in your finances that you share with other people, like, hey, partner, why don't we hire this bookkeeper that I found? And then maybe we can stop arguing and just get all this stuff sorted. Or, for example, hey, honey, I think we should talk about our sex life. It's not really working for me. Maybe it's working for you, but it's not working for me. And maybe we should like figure out something different that we could be doing or something like that. Another really great conversation to have when this new moon happens right here in your 8th house. So that's what we have for you today, Pisces. You can always find your horoscope on our website, pandoraastrology.com. And if this was your sun sign horoscope, go ahead and look up your rising sign because that horoscope will work much better. And you can find videos about the moons on our monthly forecast page on our website, pandoraastrology.com. And if you wanted that reading, you can find the readings tab and actually schedule with us there. And there's a classes tab too, if you're interested to learn more about astrology itself. And until next time, we'll see you around the cosmos. Bye.
Bye-bye.